Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something ancient, mathematical, and absolutely mind-bending. We're exploring why you wouldn't last a day practicing Pythagorean mathematical mysticism. Not the simple a squared plus b squared equals c squared you learned in school, but the full-blown religious cult where numbers were literally gods, where eating beans could get you killed, and where revealing the wrong mathematical secret meant a death sentence. Picture this, you're joining a community where every single decision, what you eat, when you speak, how you breathe, is controlled by mathematical principles that supposedly govern the entire universe. And if you mess up, well, let's just say the Pythagoreans took mathematical precision very seriously. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the gates of Croton in 530 BCE. You've heard whispers about a mysterious teacher named Pythagoras, a man who claims to understand the secret mathematical language that governs the entire universe. Word is that he's gathering followers, promising to teach them the divine science of numbers. You're tired of your ordinary life, tired of not understanding the deeper mysteries of existence. Mathematics has always fascinated you, and the promise of learning the cosmic secrets hidden in geometry and arithmetic feels like exactly what your soul has been searching for. But as you approach the simple white-walled compound on the outskirts of town, something feels off. The few people you see moving around inside wear identical white linen garments, and they walk with an eerie, measured pace. Their faces are serious, almost haunted. No one is talking. The silence is so complete it's actually unsettling. You expected to find scholars debating and discussing mathematical theorems. Instead, you find something that looks more like a monastery for mute monks. A tall, bearded man approaches you at the entrance. His eyes are intense, almost penetrating, and he seems to be studying you like you're a mathematical equation he's trying to solve. This is Pythagoras himself, though he looks nothing like the gentle philosopher you imagined. There's something commanding, almost intimidating about his presence. When he speaks, his voice is measured and precise. You seek the divine knowledge of numbers, he says. It's not a question, but knowledge comes with a price. Are you prepared to surrender everything you think you know about the world? Are you ready to live by the sacred laws of mathematical truth? You nod eagerly, thinking this sounds like exactly the kind of philosophical adventure you were hoping for. How hard could it be to learn some advanced mathematics? But Pythagoras shakes his head slowly. You don't understand. This isn't about learning equations. This is about discovering that numbers are the very essence of reality, that mathematical relationships are the thoughts of the gods themselves. Once you enter our community, you don't just study mathematics. You become mathematics. Every breath you take, every step you walk, every morsel you eat must align with the divine numerical harmonies that govern existence. He gestures toward the compound. If you enter here, you will take a sacred oath never to reveal our secrets to outsiders. Break that oath, and the consequences will be severe. You will surrender all personal possessions, for private property disrupts the mathematical harmony of our shared existence. You will eat only what the numerical laws permit, wear only what maintains ritual purity, and speak only when the sacred ratios allow it. This is starting to sound less like a philosophy school and more like joining some kind of religious cult. But you've come this far, and your curiosity is stronger than your growing unease. Besides, how extreme could it really be? These are mathematicians, not warriors or fanatics. You agree to join. The moment you step through the gates, your old life ends. Pythagoras leads you to a small chamber where several other white-robed figures are waiting. The initiation ceremony is unlike anything you expected. There are no books, no scrolls, no mathematical instruments. Instead, you're asked to kneel before a strange triangular arrangement of pebbles. 10 stones arranged in 4 rows, one at the top, then 2, then 3, then 4 at the bottom. Behold the tetractys Pythagoras intones, the most sacred of all forms. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. In this simple arrangement lies the secret of all existence. The monad, the dyad, the triad, the tetrad, unity, duality, harmony, and justice. From these 4 principles all reality emerges. You stare at the pebbles, trying to feel whatever cosmic significance you're supposed to be sensing. Honestly, it just looks like 10 rocks arranged in a triangle. But the intensity in everyone's eyes tells you that questioning this would not be wise. The oath comes next. You must swear by the tetractys itself to never reveal the sacred mathematical knowledge you're about to receive. The penalty for breaking this oath, they explain with unsettling calm, is death. Not metaphorical death. Actual, literal, physical death. Apparently mathematical secrets are so dangerous that the gods demand blood if they're revealed inappropriately. I swear by the discoverer of the tetractys, you repeat after Pythagoras, your voice echoing strangely in the small chamber, that I will guard the sacred mysteries of number, that I will never speak of them to those unworthy, and that I submit myself to the divine law of mathematical harmony. And just like that you're in. No trial period, no gradual introduction to their beliefs. You've just sworn a blood oath to a pile of rocks arranged in a triangle. The first shock comes immediately. They take away everything you own. Not just your money and valuables, but literally everything. Your clothes, your personal items, even the small knife you carried for cutting food. Private property is an illusion, explains one of the white-robed figures whose name you're not allowed to know yet. All things belong to the divine numerical order. We are merely temporary custodians of the mathematical harmony that flows through all existence. You're given a simple white linen tunic to replace your normal clothes, nothing else. No possessions, no personal space, nothing that might distinguish you from any other member of the community. Even your name becomes secondary. For now, you're simply the newest seeker of numerical truth. The second shock is the silence. New members, you're informed, are not permitted to speak for the first 2 years of their training. Not a word. You can listen, you can think, but you cannot ask questions, make comments, or engage in conversation. This period is called the time of listening, and it's supposedly necessary to purify your mind of the chaotic, non-mathematical thinking patterns you developed in the outside world. 2 years of silence. You're starting to realize you may have made a terrible mistake. But the third shock is what really makes you understand how deep this rabbit hole goes, the rules. Oh, the rules. There are rules for everything, and every single rule is supposedly based on sacred mathematical principles that you don't understand and aren't to question. Food rules come first, since you're already hungry from your journey. You're led to a communal dining area, where everyone sits in perfect geometric arrangements around low tables. The meal consists of bread, vegetables, and water. That's it. No meat, obviously, because killing animals disrupts the mathematical harmony of their souls. But also no beans. Absolutely no beans, and when you look confused, someone whispers that beans contain the souls of the dead, and eating them is basically cannibalism. No fish either, unless they have smooth scales. Apparently rough-scaled fish are mathematically impure. No animal hearts, because the heart is the seat of intelligence and eating intelligence is barbaric. No eggs, because they represent potential life and destroying potential disrupts cosmic numerical patterns. As you chew your bland bread and try to make sense of these dietary restrictions, you realize that every rule seems designed to make life as complicated and restrictive as possible. And this is just the food. The sleeping arrangements are equally bizarre. Men and women sleep in separate areas, arranged in precise geometric patterns. Your sleeping mat must be positioned exactly parallel to certain walls, which are aligned with mathematical ratios derived from the movement of celestial bodies. You're not allowed to sleep on wool, because wool comes from animals and animal products disrupt the purity of dreams. Only linen, which comes from plants and maintains the proper numerical vibrations. But here's where it gets really weird. You're not allowed to leave wrinkles in your sleeping area when you get up. The blanket must be smoothed perfectly flat, because wrinkles create chaotic patterns that interfere with the mathematically harmony of the space. And you can't just smooth it out carelessly. It has to be done in a specific sequence of movements that correspond to sacred numerical ratios. Then there are the behavioral rules that make no sense at all until someone explains the mystical mathematics behind them. Don't stir the fire with iron, because iron disrupts the pure elemental harmony of fire. Don't look in a mirror next to a light, because the reflection creates false mathematical relationships that confuse the soul. Don't walk on the main roads, because the paths worn by crowds contain chaotic energy patterns. Don't step over a yoke or a scale beam, because these objects represent divine balance, and stepping over them shows disrespect for mathematical justice. Don't pick up things that have fallen, because fallen objects have been rejected by the numerical order, and touching them brings bad luck. Don't wear rings, because circular jewelry traps cosmic energy in improper patterns. Each rule comes with a detailed mathematical explanation that you're not allowed to understand yet, since you're still in the listening phase, but you're expected to follow every single one perfectly, and violations are taken very seriously. Mess up too many times, and you're expelled from the community. In some cases, mess up badly enough, and the consequences are much worse than expulsion. As the days pass, you start to realize that joining the Pythagorean community wasn't like enrolling in an advanced mathematics course. It was like signing up to become a monk in a religion where numbers are gods, where mathematical relationships are prayers, and where the slightest deviation from numerical perfection is considered a sin against the cosmic order. You wake up before dawn each day to the sound of a wooden flute playing specific mathematical intervals. Not because the music is beautiful, but because the ratios between the notes align your soul with the harmony of the spheres. Breakfast is the same bread and vegetables every day, portioned out according to geometric principles you don't understand. Your morning exercise consists of walking in precise patterns that trace sacred mathematical shapes on the ground. Then comes the study period, which is unlike any education you've ever experienced. Instead of being taught mathematics in a logical, step-by-step way, you're expected to contemplate the divine nature of numbers through pure meditation. You sit in silence for hours, staring at geometric diagrams drawn in the sand, trying to achieve some kind of mystical understanding of why the number 7 is sacred, or how the pentagram contains the secret of universal harmony. No questions allowed, remember. No clarification, no discussion, no collaborative learning. Just you, a sandy floor covered with triangles and circles, and the growing realization that you're supposed to have mystical revelations about basic arithmetic. Your mind starts to feel strained in ways you never expected. It's not the intellectual challenge, although that's certainly overwhelming. It's the psychological pressure of being surrounded by people who seem to genuinely believe that getting a mathematical ratio wrong could literally anger the gods. Everyone around you takes this so seriously that you start to question your own sanity. Are you missing something profound, or are these people all completely delusional? The worst part is the isolation. You can't speak to ask for help or clarification. You can't form friendships with other new members because communication is forbidden. You can't even write letters to family or friends outside the community, because any contact with the non-mathematical world is considered spiritually contaminating. You're trapped in a silent bubble, surrounded by people who worship numbers, following rules that make no logical sense, eating tasteless food, sleeping on uncomfortable mats, and slowly beginning to realize that you may have joined something much more dangerous than a philosophy school. And this is just your first week. As the days turn into weeks, the psychological pressure intensifies. You start to notice that the older members of the community have a strange look in their eyes. Not peace or wisdom, but a kind of haunted intensity. They move through their daily routines with robotic precision, following the mathematical rules with an obsessiveness that's genuinely unsettling. You watch them during the silent study period, staring at numerical diagrams with an almost religious fervor. Some of them weep quietly while contemplating certain geometric shapes. Others trace mathematical symbols in the air with their fingers, like they're casting spells. A few seem to be whispering numbers to themselves under their breath, even though speech is forbidden during these times. The community feels less like a school and more like an asylum where all the patients have the same delusion about the mystical power of mathematics. But leaving isn't really an option anymore. Aside from the oath you swore, there's the practical problem that you've given up all your possessions and have nowhere to go. The community owns you now in every way that matters. Your food, your shelter, your clothing, even your daily schedule all depend on maintaining your membership in good standing. More troubling, you're starting to realize that some people who joined the community have simply disappeared. When you try to ask about them through gestures, since speaking is forbidden, the older members just shake their heads sadly and make signs that suggest these individuals couldn't handle the divine mathematical truth. What exactly happens to people who can't handle it? No one will say. But the implication is clear: leaving the Pythagorean community isn't just difficult. For some people, it's apparently impossible. As your first month ends, you're beginning to understand that you haven't joined a mathematics academy. You've joined a cult that uses numbers as a tool for psychological control, where brilliant mathematical discoveries are mixed with religious fanaticism, and where the pursuit of numerical truth has become a form of mental prison. And you're starting to suspect that the real mathematical mysteries they're hiding aren't just complex equations. Their discoveries so disturbing, so dangerous to their worldview, that people have been killed to keep them secret. But you won't learn about those for a long time yet. First, you have to survive the basic indoctrination. And right now, just making it through each day without violating one of the hundreds of mathematical rules is taking every ounce of mental energy you have. The ancient world had no concept of mental health, no understanding of psychological manipulation, and no protection for people who found themselves trapped in dangerous religious communities. Once you were in, you stayed in. And the Pythagoreans made sure of that by controlling every aspect of your existence through their sacred mathematics. You have another shock coming, the money situation, or rather the complete absence of any money situation. In the outside world, you had some degree of financial independence. You could buy food when you were hungry, purchase clothes when yours wore out, save up for things you wanted. Here, the concept of individual economic agency doesn't exist. Friends hold all things in common, the senior members tell you, quoting what they claim is a direct teaching from Pythagoras himself. This sounds noble and egalitarian until you realize what it actually means in practice. You have no personal resources whatsoever. You can't buy anything, sell anything, or save anything. If you need something, you have to ask permission from the community leaders, who will decide whether your request aligns with mathematical principles. Want an extra blanket because you're cold at night? That depends on whether adding another layer of covering disrupts the numerical harmony of your sleeping space. Need a different type of food because the standard diet is making you sick? Too bad. Changing your diet means changing the mathematical ratios that maintain your spiritual purity. This isn't communism in the modern sense, where resources are shared according to some rational distribution system. This is mathematical totalitarianism, where every economic decision is filtered through mystical numerical theories that may or may not make any sense. You also can't leave to get a job in town because contact with outsiders is strictly forbidden during your training period. You're completely dependent on the community for survival, which means you have to follow their rules no matter how bizarre or uncomfortable they become. Economic dependency turns out to be one of the most effective forms of psychological control ever invented. The clothing situation drives this point home even more clearly. Everyone wears identical white linen garments, and you're not allowed to modify yours in any way. No personal decorations, no adjustments for comfort, no individual style choices. Even the way you tie your belt has to follow specific numerical patterns. But here's what really disturbs you. The clothes aren't actually very practical for the climate. Linen is fine in hot weather, but when the Mediterranean winter arrives, you're going to be genuinely cold. Wool would be much warmer, but wool is forbidden because it comes from animals, You're expected to shiver through the cold months because mathematical purity is more important than physical comfort. When you try to express concern about this through gestures, still can't speak, remember, an older member explains that discomfort purifies the soul. Suffering builds character. And besides, if you're truly aligned with the mathematical harmony of the universe, the cold won't bother you because your inner numerical vibrations will keep you warm. This is your first real taste of how the Pythagorean community uses mystical explanations to justify practical hardships. Can't afford better living conditions. That's because material comfort interferes with spiritual development. Tired of eating the same food every day. Dietary restrictions are necessary for mathematical enlightenment. Cold at night. Physical discomfort is a sign that your soul is becoming purified. Every hardship is reframed as a spiritual opportunity, and every complaint is treated as evidence that you're not sufficiently advanced in your understanding of numerical truth. It's a perfect system for maintaining control. Any criticism of the community's policies proves that you're too spiritually undeveloped to understand why those policies are necessary. As your second month begins, you start to notice the psychological toll this is taking on everyone around you. The constant rule following, the economic dependency, the social isolation, the prohibition on normal human conversation, it's creating a community of people who have become increasingly disconnected from normal human behavior. Long-term members seem to have trouble relating to emotions that can't be expressed in mathematical terms. They analyze their feelings using numerical ratios rather than just experiencing them naturally. They've been so thoroughly trained to see everything through the lens of mathematical mysticism that they've lost the ability to trust their own instincts about anything. You watch them during meal times, carefully portioning their food according to geometric principles rather than eating according to hunger. You see them during free periods, tracing mathematical patterns in the dirt instead of relaxing or socializing. They've become so obsessed with living according to numerical rules that they've forgotten how to simply be human. And you're starting to realize that this might be the real purpose of all the bizarre regulations. Not to teach advanced mathematics, but to break down normal psychological defenses and replace them with complete dependence on the community's system of beliefs. The Pythagoreans aren't just teaching mathematical mysticism, they're using mathematical mysticism as a tool for mind control. But you're still in the early stages of this process. You still remember what normal life feels like, still question whether some of these rules actually make sense. The real test will come when you start to forget that there was ever any other way to live. That's when the serious mathematical indoctrination will begin. And that's when you'll discover that some of the secrets hidden in their numerical theories are genuinely dangerous, not just to your psychological well-being, but to your physical survival. Because in the Pythagorean community, mathematics isn't just an abstract subject. It's a matter of life and death. And some mathematical truths you'll soon learn are considered so dangerous that people have been murdered to keep them hidden. After 3 months of silence, bread and geometric meditation, you're finally ready for the next phase of your Pythagorean education. And this is where things go from merely bizarre to genuinely mind-bending. Because now they're going to teach you the real secret, that numbers aren't just tools for counting or measuring. Numbers are literally gods, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Each number is a divine being with its own personality, powers, and cosmic responsibilities. And once you understand this truth, once you really truly believe it, your entire perception of reality will never be the same again. Your first lesson takes place in a circular chamber deep within the compound, lit only by oil lamps arranged in specific numerical patterns. The walls are covered with geometric diagrams that hurt your eyes to look at directly. Complex mathematical relationships spiral outward from central points like cosmic spider webs, and you're supposed to memorize every line, every angle, every line. Pythagoras himself conducts this session, and his intensity is even more overwhelming in the enclosed space. When he speaks about numbers, his voice takes on an almost religious fervor that's genuinely disturbing to witness. Forget everything you think you know about counting, he begins. numbers are not human inventions. They are the eternal thoughts of the divine mind, the building blocks from which all reality is constructed. When you truly understand a number, you are communing directly with a god. He points to a simple mark on the wall. 1. The monad, the source of all existence, pure unity, undivided and eternal. This is not the number 1 as you learned it in childhood. This is the cosmic principle of oneness itself, the divine spark from which all other numbers flow. You stare at the mark, trying to feel whatever cosmic significance you're supposed to be experiencing. It's still just a line on a wall, but everyone else in the chamber is nodding with deep understanding, and their belief is so intense that you start to question your own perception. 2. Pythagoras continues, drawing another mark. The dyad, the first division of unity, the source of all duality, all conflict, all material existence. 2 is female, passive, unlimited. 2 is why we have matter instead of pure spirit, why we have bodies instead of existing as pure mathematical consciousness. This is starting to sound less like mathematics and more like a creation myth, but the way Pythagoras explains it, mathematics and mythology are the same thing. Numbers don't just describe reality, they create reality through their divine relationships with each other. 3. The triad, the first odd number after unity, the source of harmony and balance. 3 resolves the conflict between 1 and 2, bringing divine order to material chaos. 3 is male, active, limited. 3 is why we have music, why we have art, why we have beauty in the world at all. He draws triangles showing how 3 points can enclose space in a way that 2 points cannot. See how 3 creates form. This is not geometry, this is cosmology. You are witnessing the birth of space itself. By the time he gets to 10, the tetractys, the most sacred number containing all others, you're swimming in a sea of mystical mathematics that feels more like drowning than learning. Every number has a gender, a personality, a set of cosmic responsibilities. But here's where it gets really overwhelming. You're expected to internalize all of this to the point where you automatically think in terms of divine numerical relationships. When you see 4 objects, you shouldn't think 4 things. You should think the tetrad, the number of justice and cosmic stability, manifesting in material form. When you hear music, you shouldn't just enjoy the melody. You should analyze the mathematical ratios between the notes and contemplate how they reflect the harmony of the celestial spheres. This isn't just learning about numbers. This is learning to see the entire world as nothing but numbers in various disguises. And once you start thinking this way, you can't stop. Every tree becomes a study in mathematical proportions. Every stone becomes an expression of geometric principles. Every cloud becomes a lesson in numerical patterns. Your brain starts to hurt in ways you never imagined possible, not from the intellectual effort of understanding complex mathematics, but from the sheer mental strain of trying to perceive ordinary reality as divine mathematical relationships. It's like being forced to solve equations every time you want to look at something, and the equations never stop coming. The geometry lessons are even more intense. You spend hours drawing perfect circles, trying to understand how circular motion reflects the eternal nature of divine mathematical truth. You construct triangles with obsessive precision, learning how the relationships between their sides reveal cosmic harmonies. You trace spirals that supposedly mirror the structure of the universe itself. But this isn't practical geometry for building houses or measuring land. This is sacred geometry for communing with the mathematical gods. Every line you draw is supposed to be a prayer, every angle a form of worship, every completed shape a small act of divine creation. The pentagon becomes particularly important in your education, not because it's a useful shape for practical purposes, but because when you connect its vertices, you create a pentagram, a 5-pointed star that contains the golden ratio, the most sacred of all mathematical relationships. The golden ratio, you're told, is the signature of the divine mathematician who designed the universe. You spend weeks calculating this ratio, first with simple arithmetic, then with increasingly complex geometric constructions. But you're not allowed to think of it as just a number, approximately 1.618. You have to understand it as the divine proportion that governs everything from the spiral of seashells to the arrangement of leaves on plants to the orbits of the planets themselves. Everything in nature, according to Pythagorean doctrine, follows mathematical laws because everything in nature is made of mathematical relationships. Trees grow according to numerical ratios. Flowers bloom in geometric patterns. Animals move in accordance with harmonic principles. The entire physical world is nothing but divine mathematics expressing itself in material form. And once you really believe this, once it becomes your automatic way of perceiving reality, you can never go back to seeing the world as just trees and flowers and animals. You're trapped forever in a mathematical interpretation of existence that makes ordinary human experience impossible. But perhaps the most disturbing part of this education is learning about the music of the spheres. According to Pythagorean theory, the planets don't just move through space, they sing. Each celestial body produces a musical note as it orbits, and these notes combine to create a cosmic symphony that's been playing since the beginning of time. You can't hear this music, supposedly, because you've been listening to it your entire life and have become unconsciously accustomed to it. It's like how people who live near waterfalls eventually stop noticing the sound. But advanced Pythagoreans, those who have purified their souls through mathematical contemplation, can supposedly tune into this celestial music and use it to achieve direct communion with the divine. This becomes your new obsession, trying to hear the music of the spheres. You spend hours in meditation, listening intently for some cosmic melody that might be hidden beneath the ordinary sounds of daily life. You analyze every musical interval you hear, trying to detect echoes of planetary harmonies. You calculate the mathematical ratios that should theoretically correspond to the notes produced by different celestial bodies. Mercury, being the smallest and fastest planet, supposedly produces a high, crystalline note that resonates at a frequency related to its orbital period. Venus creates a more melodious tone, harmonious and beautiful, like the goddess of love herself. Mars thunders with a martial rhythm that matches its reddish warlike appearance. Jupiter booms with the deep, authoritative voice of the king of planets. Saturn whispers with an ancient, mysterious sound that reflects its distant, cold nature. But you never hear anything except silence, wind, and the normal sounds of human activity. And this failure to perceive the cosmic music becomes a source of deep anxiety and self-doubt. Are you not spiritually advanced enough? Is your soul too impure? Are you fundamentally lacking in mathematical intuition? The other students seem to be having mystical experiences during these listening sessions. They nod knowingly when teachers describe the ethereal beauty of Saturn's bass note or the crystalline clarity of Mercury's high-pitched song. Either they're all lying to fit in, or there's something seriously wrong with your ability to perceive mathematical reality. This doubt starts to eat at your confidence in everything. If you can't hear the music of the spheres, how can you trust your understanding of any mathematical truth? If other people are communing with divine numbers while you're just staring at symbols scratched in sand, what does that say about your spiritual development? The pressure to have mystical mathematical experiences becomes overwhelming. You find yourself pretending to understand things you don't actually grasp, nodding along with explanations that sound like complete nonsense, and reporting fake insights during meditation sessions just to avoid being seen as spiritually deficient. Yes, I can sense the divine unity of the monad, you learn to say during group discussions. The Tetractys reveals the cosmic order to me during contemplation. I hear echoes of celestial harmony in the evening silence. These lies become easier and easier to tell until you're not sure whether you're lying to others or to yourself. And this is exactly what the Pythagorean system is designed to produce. People so desperate to belong, so afraid of being expelled from the community, that they'll convince themselves they believe anything rather than admit they don't understand what's supposed to be obvious divine truth. You're being psychologically manipulated through mathematics, and the scariest part is that it's working. You're starting to doubt your own perception of reality and replace it with whatever the community tells you to believe. The mathematical mysticism isn't just confusing, it's actively undermining your ability to think independently. The daily routine of mathematical meditation becomes a form of mental torture. You sit for hours in uncomfortable positions, staring at geometric diagrams until your eyes water and your head pounds. The shapes start to blur together, triangles melting into circles, circles stretching into spirals, until you're seeing mathematical hallucinations that might be mystical visions or might just be the result of sensory deprivation and eye strain. You're supposed to achieve a state of pure mathematical consciousness, where your individual self dissolves into unity with the cosmic numerical order. But instead of enlightenment, you mostly experience confusion, frustration, and a growing sense that your sanity is slowly being eroded by the constant pressure to perceive things that probably don't exist. The other students seem to be reaching these transcendent states regularly. During communal meditation sessions, you watch them slip into trance-like conditions, their faces taking on expressions of rapture as they supposedly commune with the divine mathematics that governs reality. Their breathing becomes rhythmic, their postures perfectly still, their eyes unfocused as if they're seeing into some cosmic dimension invisible to your untrained perception. But you haven't seen anything yet, because soon you're going to learn about the mathematical discoveries that are so dangerous, so threatening to the Pythagorean worldview, that people have been killed to keep them secret. And once you know these secrets, you'll understand why some mathematical truths are considered too dangerous for human minds to handle. The geometry lessons become increasingly obsessive as weeks turn into months. You're not just learning about shapes anymore, you're learning to see geometric relationships as the fundamental structure of reality itself. Every angle becomes a manifestation of cosmic order, every curve a reflection of divine perfection. The obsession with the golden ratio intensifies to an almost religious level. You measure everything around you, looking for evidence of this sacred proportion. The length of your fingers compared to your palm, the ratio of your height to the distance from your feet to your navel, the proportions of faces, leaves, flowers, anything that might reveal the hidden mathematical signature of divine creation. And you find it everywhere, or at least you convince yourself you do. When the measurements don't quite match the golden ratio exactly, you're told that's because material things are imperfect reflections of pure mathematical. When they do seem to match, it's proof that the divine mathematician's fingerprints are embedded in physical reality. This constant mathematical analysis of everything around you becomes exhausting. Your brain never gets to rest from calculating proportions, measuring ratios, and looking for numerical patterns. You can't just look at a sunset and appreciate its beauty. You have to analyze the geometric relationships between the colors, the mathematical progression of light intensities, the harmonic proportions of the landscape. The Pythagorean community has turned mathematics into a form of spiritual obsessive-compulsive disorder. Everything must be measured, calculated, and interpreted through numerical relationships. Nothing can simply exist without being analyzed for its mathematical significance. Even your dreams become infected with geometric patterns. You sleep fitfully, your unconscious mind churning through endless calculations and shape manipulations. You wake up exhausted, feeling like you've spent the night solving equations instead of resting. Sometimes you catch yourself drawing triangles in the dirt with your finger without realizing it, or tapping out numerical rhythms on your leg during meals. The most disturbing part of this education is learning about sacred numbers that you're not allowed to understand yet. Senior members make mysterious references to mathematical secrets that are so profound, so dangerous, that only the most advanced students can be trusted with them. These secrets, they hint, could destroy your faith in the mathematical order of the universe if you learn them too early. What kind of mathematical knowledge could be dangerous? What numerical truth could be so threatening that it has to be hidden from students who have already sworn blood oaths to keep community secrets? You're starting to suspect that the Pythagorean mathematical system might have some serious flaws that the leadership doesn't want anyone to discover. You hear whispered conversations among senior members that stop abruptly when you approach. references to the unspeakable numbers and the ratios that cannot be that make no sense but fill you with a growing sense of dread. There's something they're not telling you, something that's making even the most devoted Pythagoreans look haunted and fearful. But for now, you're still trapped in the basic indoctrination phase, trying to convince yourself that you can see divine truth in geometric shapes while your rational mind screams that this is all elaborate nonsense designed to make you dependent on the community's interpretation of reality. You're beginning to understand that the mathematical mysticism isn't just about learning arithmetic and geometry. It's about breaking down your ability to trust your own perception and replacing it with total dependence on the community's collective delusions. And once that process is complete, you'll be ready to learn the really dangerous secrets, the ones that might drive you completely insane. 6 months into your Pythagorean existence, and you're beginning to understand that the mathematical mysticism wasn't just the curriculum, it was preparation for something much more invasive. Because now that you supposedly understand that numbers are gods, every single aspect of your daily life must be organized according to their divine will. And I mean everything. When you wake up, how you dress, what you eat, where you walk, when you speak, how you breathe, all of it controlled by mathematical principles that have been calculated to maintain cosmic harmony. Your day now begins not with your own natural rhythms, but with a precise numerical schedule that's been designed to align your personal existence with the mathematical order of the universe. You wake up at dawn not because it's natural or healthy, but because sunrise represents the mathematical moment when the cosmic ratio between light and darkness shifts in favor of divine illumination. The exact time varies slightly based on complex calculations involving the positions of celestial bodies, so community mathematicians have to recalculate your wake-up time every few days. Getting dressed becomes a geometric exercise in spiritual purity. Your white linen tunic must be folded in specific mathematical proportions before you put it on. The belt must be tied with a number of knots that corresponds to sacred numerical relationships. Even the way you arrange your hair has to follow patterns derived from the golden ratio, because random or chaotic appearance disrupts the mathematical harmony that your physical form is supposed to express. But here's where the mathematical control really starts to mess with your head. You're still not allowed to speak. 2 years of mandatory silence, remember. But now you understand that this isn't just arbitrary hazing. It's because speech is considered a form of mathematical expression that you're not qualified to engage in yet. Words have numerical values based on complex calculations involving their sounds, meanings, and cosmic associations. Speaking without proper mathematical training could accidentally invoke divine numbers inappropriately, which could have catastrophic consequences for both you and the community. The senior members explain this through gestures and written diagrams. Each letter of the Greek alphabet has a numerical value. Each sound produced by human speech creates mathematical ratios in the air. When words are combined into sentences, they create complex numerical patterns that can either enhance or disrupt the cosmic mathematical harmony that surrounds the community. Speaking carelessly is like performing mathematical calculations incorrectly. It introduces errors into the divine equation that governs realities. So you continue to live in enforced silence while watching more advanced members engage in carefully calculated conversations. They don't just talk, they perform mathematical dialogues where every word is chosen for its numerical significance, every sentence structured according to harmonic ratios, every pause timed to maintain rhythmic perfection. Normal human conversation has been replaced by a form of mystical mathematics that sounds more like incantations than communication. You watch these conversations with growing fascination and horror. Senior members speak in slow, measured cadences, pausing frequently to calculate the numerical implications of their next words. They use hand gestures to indicate mathematical relationships while they talk. Sometimes they stop mid-sentence to adjust their phrasing, because the original words would have created numerically inappropriate patterns. A simple question like "How was your day?" becomes a complex mathematical exercise. The speaker must first calculate whether day or afternoon creates better numerical harmony. Then they must determine the optimal rhythm for delivering the question. Finally, they must wait for the mathematically appropriate moment to speak, based on calculations involving the listener's personal numerical profile and the current cosmic mathematical conditions. Meanwhile, your education continues with increasingly complex geometric meditations that are starting to feel less like learning and more like psychological torture. You spend hours each day tracing mathematical shapes in sand, trying to achieve perfect precision in your drawings. Not because precision is mathematically important, but because imperfect geometry supposedly offends the numerical gods and brings spiritual contamination to the entire community. The pressure to draw perfect circles becomes obsessive. You use string and stakes to create precise circular shapes, then erase them, and start over if there's even the slightest deviation from mathematical perfection. Your hands cramp from holding drawing tools in unnatural positions. Your back aches from hunching over sand tables for hours at a time. Your eyes burn from staring at tiny geometric details until they're seared into your vision. Each morning, you're assigned specific geometric exercises based on your current level of mathematical spiritual development. Beginners work with simple triangles and squares. More advanced students construct complex polygons and spiral patterns. The most senior members create intricate geometric mandalas that take days to complete and supposedly contain profound cosmic truths visible only to those with purified mathematical consciousness. Your geometric assignments are calculated based on your personal numerical profile, which the community mathematicians update regularly. This profile includes your birth date converted to numerical values, the mathematical properties of your name, your physical measurements translated into sacred ratios, and your progress in various spiritual mathematical exercises. Based on these calculations, you're given daily geometry lessons that supposedly address your specific cosmic mathematical needs. But the physical discomfort is nothing compared to the mental strain of trying to see profound cosmic truth in basic geometric shapes. You're supposed to meditate on triangles until you achieve mystical insights about the nature of reality. You're expected to contemplate circles until you understand the eternal nature of divine mathematical truth. You're required to study spirals until you can perceive the cosmic patterns that govern the structure of the universe. And you're failing. Month after month you stare at these shapes and feel nothing except boredom, confusion, and growing anxiety about your apparent inability to have the mystical mathematical experiences that everyone else claims to be having regularly. Either you're spiritually defective, or everyone around you is participating in an elaborate collective delusion. The other students seem to achieve regular geometric revelations. They gasp with apparent wonder while contemplating simple triangles. They weep with joy while drawing circles. They enter trance-like states while tracing spiral patterns. You watch their faces during these sessions and see expressions of genuine rapture, which makes your own lack of response feel even more inadequate. The food situation becomes even more restrictive as your training advances. You're no longer just avoiding meat and beans. Now every meal must be proportioned according to specific mathematical ratios that supposedly maintain the numerical balance of your body and soul. Your bread must be cut into geometric shapes that reflect sacred proportions. Your vegetables must be arranged on your plate in patterns that mirror cosmic harmonies. The community kitchen operates like a mathematical laboratory. Senior members who have achieved advanced numerical consciousness calculate daily meal plans based on complex formulas involving lunar phases, seasonal changes, individual health profiles, and cosmic mathematical conditions. Every ingredient is measured with geometric precision. Every dish is prepared according to recipes that prioritize numerical harmony over flavor or nutrition. Your portion sizes are determined by calculations involving your personal mathematical profile. Taller students don't automatically get more food, instead their portions are calculated based on mathematical relationships between their physical dimensions and their spiritual numerical needs. Some days you might receive larger portions because the cosmic mathematical conditions require more material fuel for your spiritual development. Other days you might be given smaller amounts because numerical harmony demands restriction. Even the act of eating becomes a mathematical exercise. You must chew each bite a specific number of times based on calculations involving the numerical properties of different foods. Bread requires 7 chews per bite because 7 is a sacred number representing spiritual perfection. Vegetables require multiples of 3 because 3 represents cosmic harmony. Water must be consumed in carefully measured sips that correspond to harmonic ratios. You must pause between bites for intervals that correspond to harmonic ratios. The timing between your first and second bite must maintain the same mathematical relationship as the interval between the second and third bite. This creates rhythmic eating patterns that supposedly align your digestive processes with cosmic numerical frequencies. You must finish your meal at precisely the moment when the mathematical timing aligns with optimal digestive harmony. This means you can't eat according to hunger or satisfaction. You must eat according to mathematical formulas that may or may not have anything to do with actual nutrition. Sometimes you're still hungry when the numerical timing indicates you should stop eating. Other times you're forced to continue eating past the point of comfort because the mathematical calculations haven't reached completion yet. The water you drink must be measured in quantities that correspond to sacred ratios. A standard cup of water isn't just a cup, it's a precise mathematical measurement that maintains the proper numerical balance of fluids in your body. The timing of when you drink must align with calculations based on your personal numerical profile and current cosmic mathematical conditions. Even your bodily functions are supposed to be regulated according to mathematical principles that govern the cosmic flow of fluids through material forms. You're not allowed to relieve yourself randomly when nature calls. You have to wait for mathematically appropriate moments that align with the numerical harmony of your digestive system. This leads to extremely uncomfortable situations where you're desperately needing to use the latrine but having to wait because the mathematical timing isn't right yet. Community mathematicians have calculated optimal elimination schedules based on harmonic ratios that supposedly promote spiritual purification through proper waste management. These schedules often conflict with natural biological rhythms, creating physical discomfort that's considered spiritually beneficial. The latrine facilities themselves are arranged according to geometric principles that supposedly channel negative numerical energy away from the community, while maintaining cosmic mathematical balance. The direction you face while eliminating must correspond to calculated orientations that prevent spiritual contamination. Even the posture you maintain during elimination follows mathematical guidelines designed to optimize the numerical harmony of waste removal. Sleep becomes another arena of mathematical control. Your sleeping position must align with geometric patterns that supposedly channel divine numerical energy through your body while you rest. You're not allowed to sleep on your side randomly. You must position yourself according to calculations involving the orientation of celestial bodies and the flow of cosmic mathematical forces through the earth. Your sleeping mat is positioned at precisely calculated distances from the walls of your sleeping area. The space around your bed must maintain specific geometric proportions that promote numerically harmonious dreams. The angle of your head relative to the cardinal directions must be calculated based on your personal numerical profile and current cosmic mathematical conditions. Your dreams are supposed to be influenced by the mathematical arrangements of your sleeping environment. Community mathematicians believe that proper geometric positioning during sleep allows divine numerical energy to flow through your unconscious mind, producing dreams that contain mathematical insights and spiritual revelations. Students are encouraged to keep dream journals and report any numerical patterns or geometric images that appear during leisure sleep. You're supposed to fall asleep while mentally reciting mathematical sequences that align your consciousness with cosmic numerical rhythms. Counting sheep is replaced with calculating harmonic ratios or contemplating the numerical properties of geometric shapes. This mathematical meditation is supposed to purify your mind and prepare it for receiving divine mathematical knowledge through dreams. But perhaps the most invasive aspect of this mathematical control is the regulation of personal relationships. You're not allowed to choose your own friends based on natural affinity or shared interests. Instead, friendships are assigned based on mathematical compatibility calculations that supposedly determining which combinations of personalities will create optimal numerical harmony within the community. Your friendship assignments are calculated using complex formulas involving your birth date, your numerical name value, your geometric personality profile, and your current level of mathematical spiritual development. Community mathematicians analyze these factors to determine which other students have numerical characteristics that supposedly complement your own in ways that promote mutual cosmic growth. This means you might be assigned to spend time with people you find boring, annoying, or completely incompatible, while being forbidden from developing closer relationships with people you actually like. Natural human social bonds are considered spiritually dangerous because they're based on emotional preferences rather than mathematical logic. Your assigned friendship partners change periodically based on updated calculations of your mathematical spiritual progress. As your numerical profile evolves through training, the community mathematicians recalculate your optimal social connections and assign new friendship combinations that supposedly serve your current cosmic mathematical needs. Even casual interactions are regulated by numerical protocols. When you're finally allowed to speak, your conversations will be monitored to ensure that they follow proper mathematical patterns. Spontaneous emotional expressions are discouraged because they disrupt the calculated harmony of mathematical dialogue. Everything you say must serve some purpose in the grand numerical scheme that governs community life. Physical exercise becomes another mathematical ritual rather than a way to maintain health and fitness. Your daily walks must follow geometric patterns that trace sacred shapes on the ground. You're not allowed to just wander around randomly. You must walk in precisely calculated paths that supposedly channel divine mathematical energy through your body and connect you to the cosmic numerical grid that underlies all existence. The community grounds are laid out according to a master geometric plan that incorporates sacred mathematical proportions. Walking paths form triangles, squares, pentagons, and other significant shapes that students trace during their daily exercise. Each path has a specific numerical significance and is assigned to students based on their current mathematical spiritual needs. The distance you walk, the speed of your pace, the rhythm of your breathing while walking, even the number of steps you take must all correspond to mathematical ratios that promote spiritual purification. A simple walk becomes an exhausting exercise in mathematical precision that leaves you more stressed than refreshed. Your walking assignments change daily based on calculations involving your personal progress, the lunar phase, seasonal conditions, and community mathematical needs. Some days you might be assigned to trace triangular paths that supposedly strengthen your connection to cosmic harmony. Other days you might walk in spiral patterns that promote spiritual ascension through geometric meditation. Work assignments within the community are distributed according to mathematical calculations rather than personal skills or preferences. You might be naturally talented at gardening but assigned to textile work because your numerical profile indicates that weaving will provide better opportunities for mathematical spiritual development. Or you might hate cooking but be required to work in food preparation because the mathematical analysis of your personality suggests that you need the spiritual discipline of serving others through nutrition. The community operates workshops for weaving, pottery, metalwork, food preparation, and mathematical instrument construction. Each workshop is considered a mathematical laboratory where students practice applying numerical principles to practical activities. The quality of your work is evaluated not just on technical skill but on how well it reflects proper mathematical consciousness. Your daily schedule is planned weeks in advance using complex calculations that take into account lunar phases, planetary positions, seasonal changes, and community numerical needs. You have no control over how you spend your time. Every hour is allocated according to mathematical formulas that supposedly optimize your spiritual growth and contribution to cosmic harmony. Community mathematicians create master schedules that coordinate the activities of all members to maintain optimal numerical energy flow throughout the compound. If your personal mathematical profile indicates you need more geometric meditation, you'll be assigned additional geometry sessions. If calculations suggest you require strengthening of social mathematical bonds, you'll be scheduled for more group activities. Free time doesn't exist because leisure is considered mathematically wasteful. Every moment must be devoted to some activity that serves the numerical order of the universe. Even rest periods are structured as mathematical meditations rather than genuine relaxation. You're never allowed to just do nothing and let your mind wander. That would be chaotic and spiritually contaminating. But here's what's really disturbing about this level of mathematical control. You're starting to internalize it. After months of having every aspect of your life regulated by numerical principles, you're beginning to feel anxious when things aren't perfectly calculated and controlled. The idea of making spontaneous decisions or following natural impulses starts to feel chaotic and spiritually dangerous. You catch yourself automatically calculating numerical ratios before making even simple choices. Should you drink water now? Better check the mathematical timing. Is it appropriate to change your sitting position? Need to consider the geometric implications. Can you scratch that itch? Depends on whether random physical movements disrupt your numerical spiritual state. The Pythagorean system has successfully trained you to distrust your own natural instincts and replace them with mathematical anxiety. You're becoming psychologically dependent on having external numerical authority tell you what to do, when to do it, and how to do it properly. Independent decision-making feels impossible because you've been conditioned to believe that choices not based on mathematical calculations are spiritually harmful. And this is exactly what the community wants, members who are so thoroughly mathematically programmed that they can't function outside the controlled environment of numerical regulation. You're not just learning mathematical mysticism, you're being transformed into a human being who can only exist within a mathematically controlled reality. But you still don't know about the really dangerous mathematical secrets, the discoveries that have driven some members to madness and others to desperate attempts to escape the community. Those revelations are reserved for students who have been so thoroughly broken down and rebuilt according to mathematical principles that they can handle the truth about what numbers really reveal about the nature of reality. And that truth you're beginning to suspect might be much more terrifying than anything you've experienced so far. After 2 years of mathematical conditioning, you're finally allowed to speak again. But your first words aren't a celebration of regained freedom. They're a carefully calculated mathematical formula that you've been rehearsing in your mind for months. I submit my voice to the sacred numerical harmony you recite in perfect harmonic ratios, while senior members nod approvingly at your precise pronunciation and rhythmic timing. You've earned the right to mathematical speech, but what you're about to learn will make you wish you'd stayed silent forever. Because now comes the really dangerous part of your Pythagorean education, the mathematical secrets that are so disturbing, so threatening to the community's worldview, that people have been murdered to keep them hidden. And the first of these secrets is about to shatter everything you've been taught to believe about the divine perfection of numerical relationships. It starts innocently enough. You're working on an advanced geometry problem involving the diagonal of a square. Simple enough, you have a square where each side is exactly 1 unit long. Now, using the mathematical relationship that Pythagoras himself discovered, you need to calculate the length of the diagonal line that runs from one corner to the opposite corner. According to the sacred theorem, the diagonal length should equal the square root of 2. 1 squared plus 1 squared equals 2, so the diagonal equals the square root of 2. Easy calculation, basic mathematics. But when you try to express this number as a simple fraction, the way all divine numbers are supposed to be expressible, something goes horribly wrong. You start calculating. The square root of 2 should be approximately 1.414, but when you try to write it as a fraction, you can't find one that works exactly. 7/5 is close, giving you 1.4. 99/70 is closer, giving you about 1.414. 665/470 is even closer. This shouldn't be possible. According to everything you've been taught, all numbers can be expressed as ratios between whole numbers. That's what makes them divine. They represent perfect mathematical relationships that reflect the cosmic order. Numbers that can't be expressed as simple fractions aren't supposed to exist, but the square root of 2 is staring you in the face, demanding to exist, refusing to behave like a proper divine number should. It's a number that goes on forever without repeating, without pattern, without the harmonic perfection that's supposed to characterize all mathematical truth. You bring this problem to your instructor, expecting him to show you the mathematical technique you're missing, the clever fraction that will solve the puzzle and restore your faith in numerical divinity. Instead, his face goes pale with terror. "Where did you learn this calculation?" he whispers, looking around nervously to make sure no one else is listening. "Who told you to explore this relationship?" You explain that it was just a routine geometry exercise, nothing more than applying the basic theorem to a simple square. But your instructor's anxiety only increases. "You must never speak of this to anyone," he hisses. "This knowledge is forbidden to students at your level. There are mathematical truths that can destroy faith, relationships that can drive men mad. Promise me you will forget this calculation." But you can't forget it. Because once you've seen a number that doesn't behave according to the sacred laws of numerical divinity, you start looking for others. And you find them everywhere. The diagonal of any square whose sides aren't perfect square numbers creates these impossible ratios. The relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter produces another endlessly long decimal that can't be expressed as a simple fraction. Even the golden ratio that the community treats as the most sacred proportion in the universe turns out to be one of these problematic numbers when you calculated it precisely. The mathematical foundation of the entire Pythagorean worldview is built on numbers that don't actually behave the way they're supposed to. The divine numerical relationships that supposedly govern the cosmos are actually chaotic, infinite, patternless sequences that go on forever without resolution. You spend sleepless nights working through these calculations, hoping to find some error in your reasoning that will restore the rational order you've been taught to expect. You draw square after square, measuring diagonals with obsessive precision, calculating decimal places until your eyes burn and your hands cramp. But the evidence is undeniable. There are numbers that can't be tamed by fractions, relationships that refuse to resolve into neat ratios. The realization hits you like a physical blow. If the most basic geometric shapes produce irrational numbers, then the entire Pythagorean system is built on a lie. The cosmic harmony they've been teaching you doesn't exist. The mathematical order that supposedly governs the universe is actually chaotic at its foundation. You try to discuss this discovery with other advanced students, but their reactions range from terror to rage. Some refuse to acknowledge what you're showing them, insisting that you must be making calculation errors. They cover their ears when you try to explain the decimal expansions, claiming that even hearing about irrational numbers is spiritually dangerous. Others become violently angry, accusing you of trying to destroy their faith through mathematical blasphemy. They report your conversations to senior members, claiming that you're spreading dangerous ideas that threaten the spiritual development of the community. These former friends become your enemies, watching your every calculation for signs of further heretical mathematics. But a few students admit they've made the same discoveries and have been living in silent horror, afraid to reveal that the mathematical foundation of their entire belief system is fundamentally flawed. These students have the haunted look of people who've seen something that destroyed their faith but who can't admit it without destroying their lives. They tell you stories about other students who discovered irrational numbers and suffered various fates. Some had nervous breakdowns and had to be confined to isolated chambers where they spent their days drawing endless decimal expansions on the walls with their own blood. Others became obsessed with finding rational approximations for irrational numbers, spending years in futile calculations that drove them to madness. A few tried to convince themselves that the irrational numbers were illusions created by their own spiritual impurity. They increased their mathematical meditations followed even stricter numerical protocols, and subjected themselves to mathematical penances designed to purify the perception. But the irrational numbers remained stubbornly irrational, mocking their efforts to impose rational order on mathematical chaos. Because the consequences of revealing these mathematical truths aren't just social exile or loss of community membership. The punishment for sharing knowledge that threatens the Pythagorean worldview is death. You learn this when you discover what happened to Hippasus of Metapontum, a former member of the community who made the same mathematical discoveries you've just made. According to the stories whispered among senior members, Hippasus tried to share his knowledge of irrational numbers with other mathematicians outside the community. He wanted to publish his discoveries, to let the world know that the Pythagorean mathematical system had serious flaws. The community couldn't allow this information to become public. Too much depended on maintaining the myth of perfect numerical harmony. Too many people had devoted their lives to the belief that all reality could be understood through simple mathematical ratios. If word got out that this belief was fundamentally wrong, the entire Pythagorean movement would collapse. So they killed him. Not obviously, not in a way that could be traced back to the community. Hippasus simply disappeared during a sea voyage, officially drowned in an accident. But everyone in the community knows the truth. He was murdered to protect the mathematical secrets that keep the Pythagorean worldview intact. The details of his death are whispered in terrified fragments among students who've discovered the forbidden knowledge. Some say he was thrown overboard during a storm, weighted down with stones so his body would never surface. Others claim he was poisoned before the voyage began, his death timed to coincide with rough weather that would explain his disappearance. But the most chilling version suggests that his death was made to look like divine punishment for mathematical blasphemy. His ship allegedly sank in perfectly calm weather, with only Hippasus lost while all other passengers survived. The community spread rumors that the gods of mathematics had taken revenge on him for revealing sacred numerical secrets to unworthy outsiders. And now you know these same secrets. You've discovered the irrational numbers that prove the divine mathematical order is actually chaotic and infinite. You've seen behind the curtain of numerical mysticism and found that the cosmic harmony is built on mathematical impossibilities. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Speaking publicly about your discoveries would mean certain death. The community is killed before to protect these secrets, and they won't hesitate to kill again. But keeping silent means living with the knowledge that everything you've been taught is based on a fundamental lie. You start to notice that you're being watched more carefully now. Senior members who were previously friendly become distant and suspicious. Your daily activities are monitored more closely. Your conversations are observed. Your mathematical work is examined for signs that you might be exploring forbidden numerical relationships. The surveillance system within the community is more sophisticated than you realized. Certain senior members have been assigned as intelligence agents, tasked with identifying students who might have discovered dangerous mathematical truths. They use subtle questioning techniques to probe your knowledge, asking seemingly innocent mathematical questions designed to reveal whether you've encountered irrational numbers. They watch your facial expressions during geometry lessons, looking for signs that you're experiencing cognitive dissonance between what you're being taught and what you've discovered. They monitor your sleep patterns, knowing that students who found irrational numbers often suffer from insomnia and mathematical nightmares. They even analyze your drawing techniques during geometric exercises, understanding that students who've discovered irrational numbers often become obsessed with precision, desperately trying to create perfect rational approximations of irrational relationships. The paranoia within the community becomes suffocating. Everyone knows that some mathematical truths are too dangerous to reveal, but no one knows exactly who has discovered them. Students begin informing on each other, reporting suspicious mathematical activities to the leadership. Trust evaporates as people become afraid that their friends might be harboring dangerous numerical knowledge. Simple conversations become minefields of potential betrayal. If you mention that a calculation seems slightly imprecise, Someone might interpret that as evidence that you've discovered irrational numbers. If you seem uncomfortable during lessons about the perfection of numerical ratios, you might be reported as a potential mathematical heretic. Even your emotional responses are monitored. Students who've discovered irrational numbers often go through recognizable psychological stages: initial confusion, desperate attempts to find rational solutions, growing anxiety about the implications, and finally either resignation or rebellion. The community leadership knows these patterns and watches for them carefully. You realize that the community operates through a system of mathematical thought control that makes normal human relationships impossible. People can't share their genuine mathematical insights because some insights are literally lethal. Students can't collaborate on research because collaboration might lead to forbidden discoveries. Teachers can't provide complete mathematical education because complete education would destroy the community's foundational beliefs. The entire educational system is designed to keep students ignorant of mathematical truths that would threaten the Pythagorean worldview. You're taught just enough mathematics to maintain faith in numerical mysticism, but not enough to discover the contradictions that would destroy that faith. Advanced students are given increasingly complex mathematical problems, but these problems are carefully chosen to avoid calculations that might reveal irrational numbers. Geometry lessons focus on shapes and relationships that produce rational results. Arithmetic exercises use numbers that can be expressed as simple fractions. When students do accidentally encounter irrational numbers, their instructors are trained to redirect their attention, claiming that such calculations are beyond their current level of understanding, or that they're making computational errors. Students are encouraged to focus on the spiritual significance of mathematics rather than its technical precision. But some students inevitably discover the forbidden truths anyway, and when they do, they face an impossible choice: live with devastating knowledge in terrified silence, or speak the truth and face execution. Most choose silence and slowly go insane from the psychological pressure of maintaining a lie they know is fundamentally wrong. You watch these students gradually deteriorate as they try to reconcile their mathematical discoveries with their public commitment to Pythagorean numerical mysticism. They develop nervous tics from the stress of constantly monitoring their words to avoid accidentally revealing forbidden knowledge. Every conversation becomes a performance where they must pretend to believe things they know are false. They jump at sudden noises, afraid that someone might have overheard a muttered calculation or seen a forbidden numerical relationship sketched in the dirt. They become obsessed with geometric calculations as they desperately search for ways to make the irrational numbers fit into rational frameworks. They spend their free time working through increasingly complex mathematical gymnastics, trying to find approximation methods that might somehow resolve the contradictions they've discovered. They withdraw from social contact because every conversation carries the risk of exposing dangerous mathematical truths. They stop participating in group discussions about mathematical mysticism because they can't sincerely express beliefs they know are false. They become isolated, suspicious, and increasingly unstable. Some students try to deal with the cognitive dissonance by convincing themselves that their discoveries are somehow wrong, that there must be mathematical techniques they haven't learned yet that will resolve the contradictions. They spend years pursuing increasingly complex calculations, hoping to find rational expressions for irrational numbers. These students become mathematical obsessives, filling their chambers with endless pages of calculations, trying every possible approach to rationalize the irrational. They lose weight from forgetting to eat while absorbed in mathematical problems. They develop eye strain and hand cramps from constant calculation. They mutter numerical sequences in their sleep. Others decide that the forbidden mathematical truths are tests of faith, spiritual challenges that must be overcome through deeper commitment to numerical mysticism. They become even more obsessive about following mathematical protocols, hoping that perfect adherence to Pythagorean practices will somehow make the irrational numbers behave rationally. These students increase their meditation hours, follow even stricter numerical diets, and subject themselves to mathematical penances designed to purify their perception. They convince themselves that their inability to find rational expressions for irrational numbers reflects their own spiritual inadequacy rather than the inadequacy of the Pythagorean system. But a few students reach the inevitable conclusion: the entire Pythagorean system is built on mathematical lies, and continuing to live within the community means participating in an elaborate collective delusion that's enforced through murder. These students begin planning escapes. Leaving the community isn't just a matter of walking away. You've sworn blood oaths to maintain secrecy about Pythagorean mathematical knowledge. You've been conditioned to believe that life outside the numerical order is chaotic and spiritually harmful. You have no money, no possessions, no connections outside the community, and no practical skills that would help you survive in the normal world. More importantly, the community doesn't allow people to leave peacefully. Former members are considered security risks who might reveal mathematical secrets to outsiders. They're tracked down and eliminated to prevent information leaks that could damage the Pythagorean reputation. The community maintains a network of agents in other Greek cities, former members who've been allowed to leave in exchange for serving as intelligence operatives. These agents monitor former Pythagoreans who've settled elsewhere, watching for signs that they might be sharing forbidden mathematical knowledge with local scholars or mathematicians. So escape attempts must be carefully planned and secretly coordinated. Students who have discovered the irrational numbers form hidden networks, sharing information about community security procedures and planning coordinated departures that might give some of them a chance to survive. These networks operate through elaborate systems of coded communication. Mathematical diagrams become secret messages. Geometric exercises hide escape plans. Even the positioning of eating utensils during meals can convey information about surveillance schedules and security weaknesses. But the community leadership is aware that these networks exist, and they have their own surveillance systems designed to detect and eliminate escape plans before they can be implemented. Senior members who seem completely devoted to numerical mysticism are actually intelligence agents reporting on suspicious student activities. The level of paranoia becomes overwhelming. You can't trust your roommates, your work partners, your assigned friends, or even your geometric meditation partners. Anyone might be an informant. Any conversation might be monitored. Any mathematical calculation might be interpreted as evidence of forbidden knowledge. You start to understand that the community isn't just a religious cult or educational institution. It's a prison maintained through mathematical terrorism. The irrational numbers aren't just academic curiosities. They're weapons that threaten the entire system of psychological control that keeps members trapped within the Pythagorean worldview. The mathematical mysticism that initially seemed like profound spiritual truth is revealed to be an elaborate system of thought control designed to prevent people from discovering mathematical realities that would undermine the community's authority. The divine numerical harmony that supposedly governs the cosmos is actually a carefully constructed lie that's maintained through fear, surveillance, and murder. And you're trapped in the middle of it, knowing truths that you can't speak, surrounded by people who might kill you if they suspect what you've discovered, trying to maintain the pretense of faith in mathematical principles that you know are fundamentally flawed. The psychological pressure becomes unbearable. You develop chronic headaches from the stress of constantly monitoring your words and actions. You lose sleep as you lie awake at night, calculating irrational numbers and wondering whether other people can hear your thoughts. You lose weight because the anxiety makes eating difficult. Your mathematical work suffers because you're afraid to pursue calculations that might lead to forbidden discoveries. Your social relationships deteriorate because you can't trust anyone with your genuine thoughts and feelings. Your spiritual development stagnates because you can't sincerely participate in mystical practices based on beliefs you know are false. You realize that discovering the irrational numbers wasn't enlightenment. It was a form of mathematical damnation that condemned you to live in permanent fear while surrounded by people who would kill you if they knew what you'd learned. But you also realize that you're not alone. Other students have made the same discoveries and face the same impossible situation. Together you begin to understand that the only way to escape the mathematical prison is to expose the lies that maintain it. And that means finding a way to share the forbidden mathematical truths with the outside world, even if it costs you everything. Because living in terrified silence isn't really living at all. And the mathematical beauty of irrational numbers, chaotic, infinite, and impossible to control, might be more genuinely divine than any of the night rational relationships that the Pythagoreans worship. The question is whether you'll survive long enough to find out. The end comes not with mathematical revelation, but with fire and screaming in the streets of Croton. After 3 years trapped in the Pythagorean community, watching friends disappear, and living in constant terror of mathematical thought police, you wake one morning to the sound of angry voices and the smell of smoke. The local population has finally had enough of the secretive mathematical cult that's been controlling their city's politics and treating normal citizens like spiritually inferior beings who can't understand divine numerical truth. The rebellion starts at dawn with a coordinated attack on Pythagorean properties throughout the city. Angry crowds armed with torches and weapons surround the white-walled compounds where you've spent years calculating sacred ratios and contemplating geometric mysteries. But this isn't a spontaneous uprising. It's been carefully planned by local leaders who've grown tired of being governed by mathematical fanatics who believe numbers are more important than human welfare. For months, tensions have been building between the Pythagorean community and the ordinary citizens of Croton. The mathematical elite have used their supposed spiritual authority to influence city policies, claiming that their understanding of numerical harmony qualifies them to make decisions about trade, taxation, and governance. They've imposed mathematical regulations on local businesses, requiring merchants to price their goods according to sacred numerical ratios. They've interfered in legal proceedings, arguing that justice must reflect mathematical principles rather than human fairness. Most offensively, they've treated the general population with open contempt, claiming that people who haven't achieved mathematical enlightenment are spiritually contaminated and unfit for serious decision-making. The Pythagoreans have created a social hierarchy based on mathematical knowledge, placing themselves at the top as numerical aristocrats while dismissing everyone else as mathematically ignorant peasants. The local citizens have watched their city being transformed into a mathematical theocracy, where every aspect of civic life must conform to abstract numerical principles that make no practical sense. They've seen their neighbors disappear after asking too many questions about Pythagorean practices. They've been forced to participate in mathematical rituals they don't understand and follow numerical regulations that serve no purpose except to demonstrate the community's power. So when the uprising begins, it's not just about politics or economics. It's about reclaiming human dignity from a cult that's tried to reduce all existence to mathematical formulas. You're awakened by shouts and the crash of breaking pottery as the crowd storms through the main compound. Through the window of your sleeping chamber, you can see flames rising from the mathematical library where you've spent countless hours copying geometric diagrams and calculating harmonic ratios. Scrolls containing centuries of Pythagorean numerical wisdom are burning in the courtyard, while angry citizens stomp on geometric instruments and smash the carefully arranged stones that marked sacred mathematical proportions. The scene is both terrifying and strangely liberating. For years you've lived in fear of revealing forbidden mathematical knowledge, watching your every word and calculation to avoid triggering the community's deadly response to intellectual dissent. Now the entire system of mathematical oppression is literally going up in flames. Senior members of the community are fleeing in panic, abandoning their sacred geometric diagrams and numerical artifacts to save their lives. Some try to rescue precious mathematical texts from the fires, only to be driven back by citizens who've decided that Pythagorean knowledge is too dangerous to preserve. The mathematical instruments that were once treated as holy relics are being destroyed with hammers and axes. Pythagoras himself, the godlike figure who's dominated your life for 3 years, is nowhere to be seen. Some say he escaped the city before the uprising began, warned by loyal followers who detected the growing hostility. Others claim he's barricaded himself in a secret mathematical sanctuary, performing final calculations to save his soul before the angry mob finds him. But most of the community leadership is trapped in the burning compounds, and the local population shows no mercy. These are people whose families have been torn apart by Pythagorean mathematical fanaticism, whose businesses have been disrupted by numerical regulations, whose local traditions have been dismissed as mathematically ignorant superstitions. They're not interested in distinguishing between innocent students and dangerous mathematical zealots. They want the entire system destroyed. You realize that your years of mathematical conditioning have left you completely unprepared for this kind of chaotic violence. You've been trained to see everything through the lens of numerical relationships, to find geometric patterns in every situation, to calculate optimal responses based on mathematical principles. But there's no equation for dealing with an angry mob that wants to burn down everything you've been taught to consider sacred. The community's response to the uprising reveals how fundamentally disconnected from reality the Pythagorean leadership has become. Instead of trying to negotiate with the rebels or address their legitimate grievances, senior members retreat to their chambers and perform mathematical rituals designed to restore cosmic harmony. They seem to believe that if they can just calculate the right numerical relationships, the angry crowd will spontaneously achieve mathematical enlightenment and recognize the error of their ways. But the citizens of Croton aren't interested in achieving mathematical enlightenment. They want their city back from the numerical cult that's been controlling it through fear and intellectual intimidation. They've seen what happens to people who challenge Pythagorean authority, and they've decided that the only way to deal with mathematical terrorism is through overwhelming force. As the fires spread and the violence intensifies, you're faced with a choice that no amount of geometric meditation has prepared you for. You can try to defend the mathematical community that's imprisoned your mind for 3 years, fighting alongside people who would have killed you if they'd discovered your forbidden knowledge. Or you can join the rebellion against a system of intellectual oppression that's caused so much suffering. The decision becomes easier when you see what happens to students who try to flee the burning compounds. The angry crowd doesn't distinguish between willing participants and trapped victims. Anyone wearing the white linen robes of a Pythagorean is considered an enemy. Several students you've known for years are beaten unconscious while trying to escape. Others are forced to watch while their mathematical notebooks are burned and their geometric instruments are destroyed. You strip off your white robes and try to blend in with the crowd, hoping that 3 years of enforced silence and mathematical indoctrination haven't completely destroyed your ability to pass as a normal human being. But the psychological damage is deeper than you realized. You find yourself automatically calculating the geometric relationships between the burning buildings and the positions of the crowd. You catch yourself trying to find numerical patterns in the chaos of violence and destruction. The mathematical conditioning that seemed like spiritual enlightenment has actually been a form of psychological programming that's made it difficult for you to perceive reality except through numerical filters. Even as you're escaping from the community that's imprisoned you, part of your mind is still trapped in mathematical mysticism. But as the hours pass and the Pythagorean compounds burn to ash, you begin to experience something you haven't felt in 3 years, the possibility of intellectual freedom. For the first time since joining the community, you can think about mathematics without worrying about whether your thoughts are spiritually appropriate or politically dangerous. You can consider the implications of irrational numbers without fearing for your life. The irony is overwhelming. The mathematical truths that the Pythagorean community considered so dangerous, the irrational numbers that couldn't be expressed as simple fractions, are actually more beautiful and profound than any of the neat rational relationships they worshipped. The chaotic, infinite, unpredictable nature of irrational numbers reflects the genuine complexity of reality in ways that the community's obsession with harmonic ratios never could. As you watch the flames consume years of mathematical manuscripts, you realize that the most important mathematical knowledge isn't being destroyed. The irrational numbers don't exist on scrolls or stone tablets. They exist in the fundamental structure of geometric relationships themselves. You can burn every Pythagorean text, destroy every mathematical instrument, and kill every member of the community, but you can't eliminate the mathematical reality that some numbers can't be tamed by rational calculations. In a strange way, the violent destruction of the Pythagorean community is liberating mathematical truth from the intellectual prison that had confined it. The irrational numbers that were too dangerous to speak about publicly are now free to be explored by mathematicians who aren't bound by religious restrictions or threatened with death for making inconvenient discoveries. Several other students who've survived the uprising gather with you in the ruins of what used to be the mathematical library. You're all traumatized by years of psychological manipulation and terrified by the violence you've just witnessed. But you're also experiencing the first genuine intellectual conversation you've had in 3 years. For the first time, you can openly discuss the mathematical discoveries that would have gotten you killed just hours earlier. You share your knowledge of irrational numbers with other students who've made the same forbidden discoveries. You compare notes about the community's surveillance techniques and thought control methods. You piece together the full scope of the mathematical deception that's controlled your lives. The picture that emerges is even more disturbing than you realized. The Pythagorean community wasn't just hiding mathematical truths that threatened their worldview. They were actively suppressing mathematical research that might have advanced human knowledge. Students who showed promise in areas that might lead to forbidden discoveries were redirected into safer mathematical pursuits. Brilliant minds were wasted on elaborate numerical mysticism designed to prevent them from making genuine mathematical breakthroughs. The community's obsession with maintaining mathematical orthodoxy had turned them into enemies of mathematical progress. They were more interested in preserving their power structure than in advancing human understanding of numerical relationships. The mathematical mysticism that seemed so profound was actually an elaborate system for preventing mathematical development. But as you and the other survivors discuss your experiences, you begin to understand something remarkable. The mathematical knowledge you've gained, even under such oppressive conditions, is genuinely valuable. The geometric techniques you've learned, the numerical relationships you've explored, the mathematical thinking you've developed, all of this can be separated from the mystical nonsense and religious fanaticism that surround it. The Pythagorean community may have used mathematics as a tool for psychological control, but mathematics itself is not contaminated by their misuse of it. The beauty of geometric relationships, the elegance of numerical patterns, the profound insights that can emerge from mathematical thinking, these remain valid regardless of how they've been perverted by religious fanatics. Over the following days, as you and other survivors scatter to different cities throughout the Greek world, you carry with you both the mathematical knowledge you've gained and the hard-earned wisdom about how intellectual curiosity can be twisted into psychological oppression. You've seen firsthand how the pursuit of truth can become fanaticism when it's combined with absolute certainty and the willingness to use violence against dissent. Some of the escaped students become traveling mathematicians, sharing their geometric knowledge with scholars in other cities while carefully avoiding the mystical interpretations that made it dangerous. They teach the mathematical techniques they've learned while warning about the psychological traps that can ensnare people who become too obsessed with finding cosmic significance in numerical relationships. Others become critics of mathematical mysticism, writing treatises that expose the methods used by the Pythagorean community to maintain intellectual control over their members. They document the surveillance techniques, the thought control methods, and the systematic suppression of mathematical discoveries that threaten the community's authority. A few become philosophers who use their experience with mathematical fanaticism to explore broader questions about the relationship between knowledge and power. They investigate how intellectual movements can be corrupted by authoritarianism, how the pursuit of truth can be perverted into the enforcement of orthodoxy, and how genuine insight can be distinguished from elaborate self-deception. Years later, when you've established a new life in a distant city and have had time to process your traumatic experiences, you begin to appreciate the complex legacy of your time in the Pythagoreanity. The mathematical knowledge you gained was real and valuable, even though it was embedded in a system of intellectual oppression. The geometric insights you developed continue to serve you well in practical applications, even though you've abandoned the mystical interpretations that once surrounded them. Most importantly, you've learned to distinguish between mathematical truth and mathematical fanaticism. You can appreciate the genuine beauty of numerical relationships without needing to see them as divine revelations. You can explore geometric patterns without believing that they contain cosmic secrets. You can engage with mathematical ideas without surrendering your intellectual independence to mathematical authorities. The irrational numbers that once seemed like threats to cosmic order now appear as fascinating examples of mathematical complexity that can't be reduced to simple formulas. The infinite, non-repeating decimals that the Pythagorean community considered dangerous are actually windows into the rich, chaotic, unpredictable nature of mathematical reality. In your new life, you practice mathematics as a form of intellectual exploration rather than religious devotion. You share your knowledge freely rather than hoarding it as secret wisdom. You encourage questions and criticism rather than demanding blind faith in mathematical authority. You've learned that the best way to honor mathematical truth is to pursue it without fear, even when it leads to uncomfortable or inconvenient discoveries. The Pythagorean community's attempt to control mathematical knowledge ultimately failed because mathematical truth doesn't depend on human authority or approval. Numbers don't care whether they fit into neat mystical systems or support particular worldviews. Geometric relationships exist independently of human theories about their cosmic significance. Mathematical reality is too complex and surprising to be contained by any religious or philosophical system that claims to have final answers. When you look back on your years in the community, you feel a mixture of gratitude and horror. Gratitude for the mathematical knowledge you gained and the intellectual skills you developed. Horror at the psychological manipulation you endured and the human cost of the community's fanaticism. But most of all, you feel relief that you escaped with your intellectual independence intact. The mathematical legacy of the Pythagorean community is complicated. They made genuine contributions to geometry and number theory that advanced human knowledge. They developed mathematical techniques that are still useful today. They demonstrated the power of mathematical thinking to reveal hidden patterns and relationships in the natural world. But they also showed how mathematical knowledge can be perverted into a tool for psychological control when it's combined with religious fanaticism and the willingness to use violence against intellectual dissent. They proved that even the most abstract and objective forms of human knowledge can be corrupted by power and ideology. The lesson isn't that mathematics is dangerous or that mathematical thinking should be avoided. The lesson is that any form of knowledge, no matter how objective or abstract, can be misused if people become more interested in maintaining their authority than in pursuing truth. Today, as you work with numbers and geometric shapes in your new life, you remember both the beauty and the danger of mathematical obsession. You appreciate the elegance of numerical relationships while remaining skeptical of anyone who claims to have found ultimate truth in mathematical formulas. You use mathematical tools to solve practical problems while avoiding the trap of thinking that mathematics can answer every question about the meaning and purpose of existence. Most importantly, you've learned to value intellectual freedom above mathematical certainty. You'd rather live with the uncertainty of unsolved problems than surrender your mental independence to mathematical authorities who claim to have all the answers. The irrational numbers that once seemed like cosmic threats now represent something beautiful, the reminder that reality is always more complex, more surprising, and more wonderful than any system of human knowledge can fully capture. And that's a mathematical truth worth celebrating.